Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source for Black news, views, and opinions. Happy Tuesday. It's September 27th, and I'm Mimi Brown.
And I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lovo, and on today's report, the midterm elections get closer and closer, and today we're stressing the importance of how powerful knowledge is. As Democrats make their final push to get black voters to the polls, we have professor and influencer Consciously joining us for more. Meanwhile, an NFL Hall of Famer is suspended for his alleged role in a welfare fraud case in Mississippi. Millions of dollars misspent that was intended to help the underserved. We have that story. Then, a comedian loses his gig after video shows him using the N-word during a set. The video currently has TikTok users in a frenzy.
Plus, Motown Records plans a big reunion showcasing their legendary artists, and the president of Marvel speaks on Chadwick Boseman's feature in Wakanda Forever. So, mates, we have all of that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. We are 6 weeks away from midterm elections, and the get out to vote efforts are in full effect. Democrats are pushing hard to get black voters who usually sit out the midterm elections to the polls this year. To help discuss the Democrats' efforts and their get out the vote campaigns and how Donald Trump may play a role in all of this is Conscious Lee. Lee is a professor and influencer. He is currently teaching at Wilder University. He is known on social media for his thought-provoking conversation, and he uses those conversations to remind us that education is elevation. Joining us now is Conscious Lee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Conscious Lee, let's just jump right into this. I have been following you for a really long time, and so I am it's an honor to have this conversation with you. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden, they are making their way around the country to battleground states trying to get Democrats to the polls. They are doing a big push for black voters. Are we key to keeping the Democrats in the Senate with the wins in Georgia, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida? What do Democrats need to get black people to the polls?
I think that they have to spend as much funding to get black people to have the same energy that we have about the polls when it comes to national elections as they do in the midterms. I know a lot of times when we think about the national elections, we usually talk about debates, whether the elections work, whether they don't work. Well, I know you care about who run county jail. I know you care about, you feel me, how much, government funding that you get. I know you care about, how great your roads is. I know we should care about how our school funding is, and all those things I just named is literally impacted by midterm elections. So the Democrats are tasked with really trying to make us feel it,
Mm-hmm. They are. Let's talk a little bit about the governor's race in Georgia. It's Stacey Abrams versus Governor Brian Kemp. It's like part two, because we know back in 2018, Abrams lost by only 50,000 votes. But new polling this time around shows about 6 percentage points. She's running about 6 percentage points behind Kemp. They say she's having a hard time getting independent and some black male voters on her side. Abrams, she has, right now, 87% of black male voters and 94% of black women. Why do you think she's having such a hard time with black men, black male voters?
Man, unpopular opinion. I think during the pandemic, all of the men's rights, all of the, what they call it, the manosphere, Kevin Samuels, Andrew Tate type content, I would argue that was a literal pipeline for the alt-right, and a lot of our fellow black men kind of got lost in the sauce with spewing a whole bunch of those alt-right conservative points, whether we talking about being a high-value man or whether we talking about women being submissive. A lot of those understandings of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a strong black man, we see a lot of my counterparts really got swept up in some of that old white supremacist logic. So when you think about uniquely what's going on in Atlanta, in the broader state of Georgia, we know that a lot of the base of the manosphere uniquely is individuals that's in that state, you feel me? So, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I can connect the dots and recognize that a lot of sentiments I heard that was on my TikTok, on my Instagram, on my YouTube, is a lot of values that are in line with conservatism.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that before. But then what's the alternative, though, right? Like, if you don't vote for Stacey Abrams as black woman, are those men then voting for Brian Kemp? Do they really feel like that alt-right opinion, those high-value opinions are going to come from Governor Brian Kemp?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if we being real, if you spend any time just making analysis or just really peeping game what's coming on from those, those echo chambers of the manosphere, is really thinking about the ways that conservatism politically, socially, economically align with free thinking and bringing the black family about. So when you think uniquely about how a lot of black men are swinging for power, recognizing that black women have more representation in different spaces, you find that a lot of dudes is like, hey, you black women getting something must mean it's taken from me. Therefore, it makes sense for me to vote this particular way because it's more in line with these conservative values,
Wow. I just can't see that. I mean, not saying that that's not what's happening. That just sounds really backwards to me that someone would actually think like that. So, wow. OK, that's very interesting. Let's move on. Let's talk about the other race in Georgia. Senator Raphael Warnock going against Herschel Walker. Warnock is doing better with black men and independent voters in the state. Polling shows that Senator Warnock has Senator Warnock has a razor thin lead over Walker. I just want to know, though, I know you've heard Herschel Walker. You've heard him speak. You know what he stands for. We've seen Senator Raphael Warnock. Why is this race so close?
This race so close because the loyalty of the Republican Party. We know that. To me, I think that a lot of times the black community get trivialized for not having responsibility or accountability and being like, where are you and your homies when they're doing X, Y, and Z? We see that a lot of that come from conservative media's projection. And that one of the reasons why we see Herschel Walker doing so great is because he got endorsed by a Republican. He got endorsed by the great Lord and Savior, Donald Trump himself. So when we see, individuals that recognize they're incompetent, that acknowledge they're not that smart, that acknowledge they can't debate, that acknowledge they can't really do nothing with the constituents, they ride literally on the loyalty of the Trump base and recognizing that it's a lot of people that either A, want to prove their loyalty to the Trump base, or B, don't want to be alienated from the Trump base. And as a result, they're also, adding to the legitimacy of Herschel Walker, even though he's talking about him being incompetent. And the last thing I would say on it, we see how a lot of Republicans play in our face. You feel me? A lot of them still believe that Barack Obama was only voted for because he was black, but they ain't recognized that Herman Cain or, Ben Carson and now, Herschel Walker don't mean that it's because you're a black person we're going to vote for you. So I'm hoping, state of Georgia, please, everybody, you feel me, in Georgia that has hopefully went and made sure that they ain't played with your registration, that y'all go out there and show these Republicans that they can't assault our intelligence and let Herschel Walker and his son know, stop playing with us politically, socially, economically, talking about that.
I love that. Absolutely. No, those were all really good points. Last year, this time, President Biden's approval ratings, they were sinking. But in the recent weeks, he's been on the rebound. But much of that, I think, is coming from Democrats looking more favorably about what's going on in Capitol Hill. But what issues do you think Democrats must talk about to get black voters to the polls come November?
My granny always said you got to follow through what you said you was going to do when you said you was going to do it. You feel me? So for me, it's thinking about all the sentiments and all the verbiage that was used so poetically after, Kamala said, we did it, Joe, we did it. You feel me? So it's thinking about the uniqueness of black women and how both of them acknowledge that black women fueled the campaign for them to get in the presidency. It's being able to see some real material policy that's trying to improve the material reality for black women uniquely. And also thinking about all of the things you said about reparations, or all the things you said about police brutality, all the things, that Biden put out a plan. It's now following through more suit, which now you're going to be looking for your reelection, man. So now it's like, what can I go find on your website with this great promise you made to black folks, and seeing which ones you following through on politically, socially, economically? You acknowledge all these disparities in healthcare and education and all this stuff. What you doing?
So true. Show us something that you follow through on all of the things that you've spoken on leading up into these midterm elections, since now you definitely need us once again to show up for you. Absolutely. Well said. So lastly, because we are running out of time, I wanted to ask you, you are so outspoken online covering issues from Ray J to Kanye screaming black injustice to states' rights. How did you get your start in edutainment, Conscious?
And I got my start in edutainment by falling in love with college policy debate, being a policy debater, just thinking about the policymaking process and how black people is impacted historically, politically, socially, economically. You see from talking to me, there's going to be a few things I know how to repeat and comprehend how to connect the dots on. So really being able to try to education is elevation, being able to expose our people to a lot of the information that I feel like I should have been got access to, but I didn't get access to at 19, 20. 21. So now it's about recognizing I had to do a SAT, ACT, and do all this stuff to get into the college. And then that's how I was able to get what they was gatekeeping from me. Now, how I learn and how I really love to do is give access to other people. And that's why I really stumbled across edutainment and seeing that I had a knack and a passion for just, teaching.
Mm-hmm. That you do. Consciously, thank you so much for being here. Let everyone know where they can follow you and keep up with some of your videos.
Yeah, theconsciously.com is my website. I do workshops, facilitations. I have an online class right now about social media and social issues. I also got another class coming out, The Consciously, on all social media platforms. My motto is education is elevation, research over me search. And I promise when you tap in with me, it's going to be some real, raw, organic things.
We love that. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Black Report. It's been very, very, very enlightening.
All right, soulmates, the clock is ticking on Congress to get a deal together to avoid a government shutdown. Representatives on both sides are pressing for a short-term funding bill, also called a continuing resolution, that would help the government stay funded at current levels until after the midterm elections.
Maybe we have a pretty good balanced bill. That's what we're trying to do. I've done all I can do. I feel optimistic about it. I think that it looks good, and I think when people look in there and says, no, I'd rather vote to shut down the government than do the first permitting bill and maybe the only permitting reform bill, Neil, that we'll ever do in our lifetime, because I don't ever see it coming back again.
The holdup for Manchin are changes to the permitting laws on energy projects. Now, Bernie Sanders, who is an opponent of fossil fuels, is in a battle over those permits with Manchin. The government will shut down Saturday without a new spending measure.
President Biden's student loan forgiveness program will cost American taxpayers $400 billion. That's according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Last month, Biden announced the federal government will forgive at least $10,000 in student loan debt for borrowers who earn under $125,000. $20,000 will be chopped off student loans for people who got Pell Grants. The CBO also says 95% of student loan borrowers will qualify for the reduction.
Americans' approval of Congress is up, but that's not saying much. A new Gallup poll says 23% say Congress is doing a good job. That's up from its lowest point at 16% in June. Still, 75% of Americans think lawmakers in Washington are doing a bad job. The poll comes weeks before the November midterms. The increase is attributed to the improved polling numbers for Democrats.
ESPN and Sirius XM are suspending NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre's podcast as well as his radio show. Now, the moves come after revelations of the former quarterback's entanglement in a welfare fraud case that took place in Mississippi. According to new documents, the NFL quarterback, he tried 2 years later to get additional cash from the state's welfare agency for another sports facility. Now, the governor at the time, Republican Phil Bryant, texted with him in 2019 about building an indoor practice facility for the University of Southern Mississippi's football team. The state spent millions of dollars that should have gone to help the poor in the state. The state of Mississippi has filed a civil lawsuit against him and others to recover more than $20 million in misspent welfare money. Every time this story comes up, there's always so much to talk about when I put my note up here. So first thing first, again, his Sirius XM show has been suspended. 2 years later, he went back for even more cash. So where there was a story before that said he didn't know that he was doing something illegal. That was a lie, because not only did you do it once, you went back and did it twice. And so just going back to the text message conversation that he had with the then governor, he asked the then governor, and the governor said at the end, he says, "This is going to be a great meeting, but we have to follow the law. I am too old for federal prison." So then again, we have exhibit C, D, F, and G, right? Where you knew that you did something wrong. You went back to go do something wrong again. And then the person that you were texting also knew that it was something wrong, because he's like, look, I want to help out. This sounds pretty good, but something seems a little sketchy in the water here. So he needs to be beyond the jail, and also want to stress that it was not just him, because and others. It says he was one. I don't remember how many people, but it wasn't just him doing this by himself. Right. There were other people as well that were in on it. So his name is the face of it because he's the NFLer, but the other people, those names need to come to the light as well, because they were just as equally a part of this whole scheme.
Yeah. I mean, Demi, when you really think about this, you really start to realize how deep this runs. I mean, when we've been covering the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis, right? And a lot of people online were like, you know, those people need to just move or do better and all these things. But if we have millionaires taking the money that is aimed at helping the population actually do better, then how can we say that? I mean, I read a story the other day where this father, his children were taken away, and he went down to apply for rent assistance. He needed light assistance, all kinds of things, but the funds were depleted. This is the same fund in which Brett Favre stole from that should be going to the people who actually need the money. So someone's child got taken away. They were not able to get their child back because they were not able to prove that they had a roof and they have the utilities and things like that. And so when we're looking at the water crisis, we're looking at all the things that these people are suffering, it all goes back to the same thing. Rich people making themselves get richer, poor people suffering. I mean, I think people are tired of washing their baby in poison water. I mean, they should not have to choose that so that we can build football fields and volleyball stadiums for people who really don't need them.
Yeah, you know, we're talking about places where his daughter, she participates in sports as well. Brett Favre is not above the law. Let's be plain about that, right? And you think about his name carries a lot of weight within that state, so I'm shocked he couldn't get investors that would want to get involved, but instead he would want to take money from other people who are less privileged or don't have the funds to even have a meal on their table. So very disgusting to hear this story, and like you said, it shouldn't just be his name, Demi. All the names should come out, definitely. All right, a QAnon follower is the latest rioter at the Capitol found guilty by a federal jury. Douglas Jensen was found guilty of obstruction of Congress and assaulting a police officer on January the 6th of last year. Jensen led rioters as they chased a U.S. Capitol Police officer, Eugene Goodman, up a staircase. He was also found guilty of carrying a folding knife in his pocket. It only took jurors 4 hours to find Jensen guilty of all charges.
And the families of 4 black women killed in a car crash caused by a drunk driver in Florida are upset the driver is only getting 4 years in prison. Heather Finley was sentenced last week, nearly 4 years to the date she was arrested back in 2018. Prosecutors say Finley was doing 59 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone when she slammed into a car carrying 4 women who were all under 30 years old. All of the women left behind children ranging from newborn to 12 years old. Finley was sentenced to 4 years, including 6 years of probation. The maximum sentence would have been about 37 years. The family of the victims believe the sentencing outcome would have been different if they were another race.
And a prominent law school in San Francisco is getting a name change. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill approving the name change of the University of California's Hastings College of Law. The school was founded in 1878 by Serenus Clinton. Hastings, that was a wealthy rancher who was also a sponsor of atrocities against Native Americans in the state. The law school's graduates include Vice President Kamala Harris. One provision of the law is that the school will be renamed after a Native American.
A comedian on a Carnival cruise was fired over the weekend for repeatedly using the N-word during one of his sets. This is the video set. It has no audio, unfortunately. A black woman who was on the cruise went on TikTok to complain about Rob O'Reilly's use of racial slurs. Now, he reportedly told the audience that if they were offended by his language, they could leave the show. Not quite like that is how he said it. O'Reilly has appeared on The Tonight Show and Last Comic Standing. His Facebook and Twitter page has been erased. I bet it has. But, you know, people, they get together, and Twitter, they definitely got together and pulled some other little so-called jokes he had on his Twitter page.
Did they?
For me, here's what Rob O'Reilly's saying. People are like ski slopes. I'm scared of the black ones. When I look at my fellow man, I don't think that guy's black or that guy's Puerto Rican. I think that guy's a felon. Did you know that 1 in 15 black men has HIV? That's a pretty insane statistic. Every NBA player probably has one dude with AIDS. And Marie, one more. Today, every store acts like a crackhead broke in. Come in at 4 a.m. and buy a TV half off. Guess that's why they call it Black Friday.
Wow.
So now, if you're a cruise, because I've been on cruises, and you want to make sure you have someone
You just got off a cruise.
Yeah, I sure did.
Okay.
That pleases everyone. And you have this, and first of all, he should be canceled, but whoever hired him on the cruise should lose their job for not doing the research, because this is downright disgusting.
Not to mention you threatening me to leave, and it's like, I'm on a cruise. Like, I can't just like...
Where am I going?
It's like, I didn't just come to like a show in Las Vegas and I can go home. Like, I'm literally like stuck on a cruise for however many days. Hopefully it was a 3 to 4 day or not a 7-day cruise. And it's like threatening me to leave, and it's just like, sir, like, where am I going to go? I'm in the middle of the Antarctic, the Pacific Ocean right now. Where am I going to go? And Romeo, I'm happy that you brought up some of the other videos, because I didn't even know some of the stuff that he said.
Man.
And it's just a shame that in 2022 we still have people that don't know where the limits are. Like, I understand there's comedy, I understand being cheeky, I understand saying stuff that's going to get people riled up, but also too, like, there is a such thing as going too far.
There is such thing as going too far. The N-word is definitely where you should draw that line, right? And what's so interesting about this is that the black woman who recorded this, she said that the reason why there's no audio is not that we couldn't play it for you, Soulmates. There just is no audio because it's at Carnival Cruises. You're not allowed to record. And so she was not allowed to take audio. So she only could show him on stage. So a lot of times people, and then she got a lot of criticism because people were saying, well, how do we know she's not lying? And then they were like, why, when things are happening to black people, do we need to have the actual proof? Do you need to have the video? Do you need to see it? Do you need to hear it in order to believe that this happened? That's why I'm so glad you read those jokes, because it clearly shows that this is who this guy is. And the fact that he's been booked on a lot of these television programs shows that a lot of people aren't doing their research, or that racism isn't a deal breaker.
But Mimi, I'm popular opinion here. I do believe if you're going to record, you might as well get the audio. Like, I feel like,
There's audio.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, well, they're saying
for
like,
that particular case.
Yeah,
they're saying.
Right. I'm saying, like, if you're gonna post it, you might as well give us all the way, because then there are, like you said, there are going to be people that are like, well, is this true? Because I mean, if it was a white person, it doesn't matter, and someone says, oh my God, you're not going to believe this black person said whatever, but there's no audio to follow up with it. Of course, you need to see the audio. But I think that's the problem. I think that's how we're trained to believe. I think that you should just believe black women no matter what they say. Like, we always, as black people, we always have to find someone to believe us by having, an absorbent amount of proof. And it shouldn't be that way. It just should not be that way. If she said it happened, then it happened. Why do we always have to have the video? White people do not. Do you know how many people are arrested every day because a white person called and said, so-and-so did something to me, and then they just go and arrest you?
Some people lose their lives in that case.
Yes, they lose their lives. Black people are killed so many times because of stuff like that. But when we say that, we have to have all kinds of proof about it. That's not fair.
No, and some of the video, they did cut out with an N-word, but they did leave in on the video I saw where he said, get the F out if you don't like it. And I was kind of appalled at a lot of people that applaud to when he said that. So now you got to be on a cruise with those people. You got to see them for the next 2 or 3 days saying,
where am I going to go?
Exactly. And it's like, so you're clapping on the fact that he's saying this, on the fact that he's offending me, and you think it's okay?